In late 2025, threats between Tehran and Jerusalem escalated from veiled diplomacy to overt military posturing. Continues with deep analysis of Iran's nuclear advances, Israeli warnings, prior skirmishes in Syria, international sanctions, intelligence leaks, and rising public fear across both nations. In the wake of a Mossad report confirming Iran's imminent weapons-grade enrichment, Israel launched precision airstrikes. Details missions, Iranian casualties, surprise strikes on centrifuge facilities, Iran's leadership backlash, the world's response. Within hours of Israel's strikes on Natanz and Isfahan, Iran retaliated, not with words, but with fire. Iran's counterattack began at 4:43 a.m. local time. Dozens of Shahed drones took flight from bases in Kermanshah and Khuzestan, heading westward. Simultaneously, mobile launchers deployed Fatah 110 and Khyber Shikan missiles toward Israeli territory. In Tehran, chants of death to Israel erupted spontaneously as state TV, AIRED live footage of missiles being launched. The first wave, 52 drones, 18 cruise missiles, 6 ballistic-class rockets. Israel's Iron Dome lit up the night sky, intercepting many but not all impact sites. Two residential buildings in Beersheba were hit. A command post in the Golan Heights was struck. Partial blackout in southern Tel Aviv. Casualties: 27 Israeli civilians killed, over 100 injured. Panic-induced stampedes in shelters reported. Iranian state media framed the retaliation as Operation Martyr Soleimani. For the first time in over a decade, Israel's Iron Dome showed signs of being overwhelmed. The Iron Dome is designed to stop short and mid-range threats, using a combination of radar tracking and Tamir interceptors. But on this night, Iran used saturation tactics deliberately, flooding the airspace with decoys and speed-variant missiles. Two advanced Iranian missiles flew at altitudes and trajectories the Iron Dome was not optimized for glide-capable warheads moving at near hypersonic speeds. One such missile slammed into Soroka Medical Center in Beersheba. Emergency backup systems failed. Doctors performed surgeries using flashlight apps. Prime Minister Noam Regev addressed the nation. "We are not broken. We are wounded, and we will answer this with justice, not fury." Israel's Knesset approved emergency mobilization. Reserve troops were called. Ports were locked down. Beyond the front lines, the war has entered living rooms, playgrounds, and hospitals. In cities like Tel Aviv, Ashkelon, and Beersheba, the piercing wail of sirens has become constant. Schools were shut down indefinitely. Public bomb shelters overflowed with frightened families. Social media is flooded with videos of mothers clutching children beneath staircases, while the military encourages everyone to stay indoors. In Ashdod, a building collapsed entirely from a missile strike. First responders pulled a 9-year-old girl alive from the rubble. Her twin brother was found hours later, wrapped in his backpack, lifeless. Electricity outages affected nearly 500,000 homes. But even amid chaos, resilience emerged. Civilians formed volunteer brigades, delivering food to the elderly and assisting hospital staff. A single violinist played Hatikva in a bomb shelter, calming dozens. Israelis weren't just under attack, they were holding together. In Iran, the airstrikes and global isolation triggered their own wave of suffering. Following Israel's attack on Iranian military infrastructure in Isfahan and Tehran, the government declared a nationwide alert. Several power plants were temporarily disabled. Iran's already fragile economy teetered as banking networks experienced a cyber attack that paralyzed online services. At least 80 civilians died when an Israeli missile struck a warehouse that doubled as housing for displaced families. Long lines formed at fuel stations, and panic buying emptied grocery stores. Tehran's metro system shut down twice due to fears of follow-up attacks. Students protested at Tehran University, some criticizing Israel, others blaming their own government for prioritizing military escalation over peace. Internet access was intermittently cut. Thousands attempted to flee cities, crowding the highways in makeshift convoys. Many couldn't afford to leave at all. Even in Qom, a religious stronghold, whispers of fatigue could be heard. "We've buried too many sons," an old woman told a reporter. "If this war doesn't kill us, hunger might." While the bombs fell, America made its first move, not with missiles, but with medics. The U.S. initially refrained from direct military engagement, but behind closed doors, President Taylor Monroe authorized the rapid deployment of U.S. Navy medical ships to the eastern Mediterranean. Within 72 hours, USS Mercy docked near Haifa to assist overwhelmed Israeli hospitals. USAID teams arrived in Iraq and Jordan to prepare for refugee flows. The U.S. Treasury Department approved a $2 billion emergency humanitarian fund. Meanwhile, cyber teams from U.S. Cyber Command were quietly deployed to reinforce Israeli power grids, fearing Iranian malware embedded during earlier espionage operations. State Department envoys visited Turkey and Qatar to explore back-channel diplomacy. On the surface, aid and diplomacy. Beneath the surface, America was preparing for war. As bombs fell, the world rose, in protest, in grief, and in fear. In cities like London, New York, Berlin, and Islamabad, people took to the streets. Some held signs saying "Peace now," while others accused global powers of fueling the conflict. Social media exploded with real-time videos of destroyed apartments, crying children, and funerals streamed live from both Israel and Iran. Global celebrities issued appeals for de-escalation. Religious leaders from Mecca to the Vatican urged prayer and peace. The Pope himself called the war a curse on humanity. Meanwhile, the war dominated headlines. CNN, Iran's missiles reached deep into Israel. BBC, civilians trapped as Iron Dome strains under fire. Al Jazeera, Tehran vows revenge. World holds its breath. Disinformation also spread. Deep fakes of American bombers attacking Iran, which hadn't happened yet, went viral. The line between truth and terror grew thinner by the day. When Iran's hypersonic missiles evaded Israel's defense, the U.S. realized the old rules no longer applied. After Iran's unprecedented use of hypersonic projectiles, some reaching speeds of Mach 9, the world's defense alliances reeled. For years, the Iron Dome and Arrow systems were considered unbreachable. That illusion was now shattered. The Pentagon immediately greenlit a classified test. Arrow for interceptors, still in development, were secretly flown to an Israeli base. U.S. engineers worked alongside Israeli crews to calibrate and stress test these interceptors under real war conditions. Simultaneously, B-2 Spirit bombers were deployed to Diego Garcia and Guam, their presence unannounced, but unmistakable. Footage of one being refueled midair was deliberately leaked to send a message. "We're watching. We're ready." As Tehran burned and Tel Aviv bled, America moved pieces across the board. By day 12 of the conflict, the U.S. had deployed 2,000 Marines, from the 26th MEU to a forward base in Jordan, F-35 squadrons from Germany to bases in Cyprus and UAE, naval carrier strike groups to the eastern Mediterranean. Publicly, these were defensive maneuvers, but intelligence analysts knew this was a calculated containment operation, keeping the Strait of Hormuz open, deterring Hezbollah, and preparing for possible retaliation if Iran crossed a red line. A leaked memo revealed CENTCOMs were planned codenamed Desert Aegis, which mapped out layered defensive perimeters around Israel, Saudi Arabia, and U.S. assets in Iraq and Kuwait. The real war, many said, was being fought in circuits, not cities. U.S. Cyber Command worked around the clock, intercepting Iranian military chatter and deploying counter-espionage tools. Their goal, to preempt further attacks by jamming Iranian missile guidance systems and protecting Israeli grid networks. Anonymous sources confirmed a backdoor cyber intrusion into Iran's satellite systems, disrupting the real-time sensing of certain missile paths. Meanwhile, Israeli Mossad shared real-time intelligence with U.S. agencies, identifying launch sites and drone corridors. Through advanced AI, both nations began predictive analysis on Iranian movements, some even before the missiles were fired. The digital war room, deep in a Virginia bunker, was described as the most integrated combat intelligence operation since the Cold War. While soldiers deployed, Washington debated, should America go to war? President Monroe delivered an emergency address to Congress, urging caution while promising protection for allies. The Senate Intelligence Committee, however, was divided. Hawkish senators demanded limited strikes on IRGC headquarters. Others warned it would escalate into a regional inferno. Across the country, protests flared. Some chanted, "Hands off Iran." Others waved flags, demanding the U.S. stand by Israel without fear. Inside the West Wing, advisors debated if the 2001 AUMF could legally justify intervention. National Security Advisor Elena Roy whispered to Monroe, "One wrong move, and the entire Middle East explodes." As the front burned, the sides began to smolder. On day 14 of the war, Hezbollah launched over 80 Katyusha rockets into northern Israel, targeting Haifa, Safed, and Metula. Though intercepted by Israel's David Sling, the message was clear. Iran's proxies had entered the war. At the same time, Houthi rebels in Yemen, long backed by Iran, fired drones toward Eilat and Negev nuclear research centers. Some were intercepted over the Red Sea by Saudi Patriot systems. Others were lost in desert airspace. Israel responded swiftly, airstrikes on Hezbollah supply tunnels in southern Lebanon, covert drone hits on Houthi launch pads in Sada province. But with each retaliation, another flame ignited. Civilians in Lebanon and Yemen suffered collateral damage, sparking regional sympathy and complicating alliances. Jordan, caught in the crossfire, deployed troops to border towns. Egypt raised alert levels in Sinai. What began as a two-nation war was now drawing the entire region closer to the edge. As America reinforced Israel, its rivals circled quietly in the shadows. Russia, already entangled in Ukraine, used the war to criticize U.S. global overreach. President Putin called Israel's preemptive strike a reckless act of Western imperialism, and held joint exercises with Iranian naval forces in the Caspian Sea. China, though silent at first, took a different route, economic and diplomatic. It publicly urged both sides to de-escalate, but secretly increased all purchases from Iran, bypassing U.S. sanctions. Beijing also hosted Iranian envoys for a peace summit that lacked Israel's involvement, signaling China's push for regional influence without Western oversight. Cybersecurity analysts reported that Chinese-origin malware was detected probing U.S. defense contractor networks. While not proven, it hinted at a widening information war. Caught between allies and economic shock, Europe scrambled for peace. The European Union launched Operation Olive Path, a five-nation diplomatic effort led by France, Germany, and Italy. Their goals: de-escalate missile attacks, initiate talks for a temporary ceasefire, secure humanitarian corridors in Gaza, Lebanon, and western Iran. But internal divisions slowed progress. France advocated for engaging Iran directly. Germany supported unconditional Israeli defense. Eastern European states, wary of Russian support for Iran, urged caution. Meanwhile, rising oil prices and refugee fears triggered protests in Paris, Rome, and Athens. Still, a glimmer of hope appeared when both Iran and Israel accepted EU observers, a first since the war began. In New York, voices rose in condemnation and calculation. The United Nations Security Council convened 5 times in 12 days. A resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire and humanitarian access was vetoed by Russia and China. The US, UK, and France pushed for targeted sanctions on Iranian military firms and travel bans on IRGC commanders. In response, Iran announced the suspension of cooperation with the IAEA and promised to accelerate nuclear development. Without apology, Secretary General Antonio Guterres declared, "We are walking blindfolded into catastrophe." Meanwhile, grassroots activists across the world flooded social media with messages of unity. Stop the war, humanity over politics. We are all civilians in this conflict, yet bombs continue to fall. Diplomats whispered behind curtains, and history edged toward another chapter of irreversible change. As bombs lit the sky, centrifuges quietly spun underground. Following the collapse of IAEA inspections and Israel's attack on Natanz, Iran accelerated its nuclear enrichment program, moving past the 60% threshold. While still short of weapons grade, international analysts warned, weaponization is now a matter of intent, not time. Iran's leadership, surrounded by hardliners, framed their enrichment as a defense measure. Tehran's parliament held televised votes, showing unanimous support for what they called strategic deterrence. Whispers inside Western intelligence suggested that Iran might be preparing a first-ever nuclear demonstration, a test in the Lut Desert. If Israel crossed any more red lines, Washington was alarmed. Israeli jets were readied. The countdown had begun. Every war has a point of no return. America quietly drew its line in the sand. President Monroe held a midnight call with Israel's PM, Regev. The message was clear. You are not to strike Fordo or Qom without consulting us first. We will not enter a war we can still prevent. At the same time, U.S. nuclear submarines moved into position near the Persian Gulf. One leaked image of a Trident missile silo was enough to reset the conversation. Defense Secretary Melissa Cho went live on national TV, saying, "If Iran uses or even tests a nuclear weapon, the United States will respond militarily and decisively." It was the clearest threat yet. The war stopped not because the weapons ran out, but because too many lines had almost been crossed. Qatar and Switzerland brokered a fragile ceasefire agreement. It included immediate halt to airstrikes from both Iran and Israel, deployment of UN observers to the Golan Heights and Iraqi border, a secret understanding that Iran would freeze uranium, enrichment beyond 60%. Neither side claimed defeat, but neither celebrated. The deal was signed in a bunker beneath Geneva, not with fanfare, but with fatigue. The world had stepped away from the edge, barely. What war doesn't destroy, it forever changes. Over 5,000 people were killed across Israel, Iran, Lebanon, and Yemen. Thousands more were displaced. Economies faltered. All prices spiked. But in the wreckage, something else bloomed: global unity. The U.S. pledged $10 billion for post-war reconstruction across the region. Iran and Israel both allowed Red Crescent and Red Cross access to war zones for the first time in decades. In schools from Tehran to Tel Aviv, students learned the same lesson. The world ended once, and then didn't. But the ceasefire remains fragile. The shadows of war still linger, and every siren in the distance still sounds like a warning.